This conference will now be recorded.
Thanks for coming to today's SAI community meeting. We will do a regular pull request discussing. We have three pull requests on the agenda. The first one is Marianne from Mellanox.
Okay. Hi everyone. So today I wanted to present a proposal for generic resource monitoring. So SAI today already has some API for querying availability for a set of object types. So I will present a new API for that will try and make it more generic and applicable to any type of object or entry. And we will go over the API and changes that I'm going to introduce. The motivation for this API is basically the same as what we have right now for critical resource monitoring. So that SAI manages ASIC resources, and it is important for the user to query the current resources usage in the ASIC for different types of SAI objects. But it is also important to make as much resources availability exposed as possible. So what it means is that today we have a predefined set of objects and entries that we can query the availability for. But actually, different switch implementations could have different number of available entries or objects for another types. Like for example, you can query how much router interfaces you can create on the switch, or virtual routers, how much virtual routers the switch supports, or any other kind of entries or objects. So this is the first motivation. And the second one is that SAI is still extending. So we are adding new object types. Like, for example, there is an ongoing discussion about NUT proposal. So it means that new object types will be proposed, new entries will be added, new SAI object types will be added. And we need APIs that will allow us to work with those new object types without any need to write any additional attributes to the switch, etc. So the proposal essentially boils down to one function. The function is called SAI object type get availability, with the following set of parameters. First one is switch ID, followed by an object type. So the object type is an in parameter by which we specify for which SAI object type we want to query the resources that are left. Also, we have here attribute count and attribute list, to which I will return a little bit later. And the output parameter count, pretty much the same as we used in counter APIs, that will tell us how much more entries can we create. So why we need attribute count and attribute list is that because some object types or some entries actually can be of different types. It means that the same objects or the entries of the same object type could actually belong to different pools in resource pools in hardware. Like, for example, the most trivial one is to distinguish between IPv4 routes and IPv6 routes. So for that, the API will have a new tag, which is called is resource type tag. And this will tell us that this attribute can be used for querying a more specific type of object. So, for example, we could query separately how many more IPv4 entries can we create and how many IPv6 route entries are left in the hardware. So this is it for the function. So basically how it will look like, we will pass the switch ID, the SAI object type route entry, the attribute count will be 1, and attribute list will consist of this one attribute specifying either IPv4 or IPv6 family. And then we could query either one of those resources left. And same goes for others, like we could apply this API for router interfaces, next hops, ACL entries, ACL tables, pretty much any type of SAI objects. Okay, so this is it. Maybe anyone has some questions.
Hey, Mary, thanks for the presentation. I just had 2 quick questions. One is, does your function take into account sort of shared tables? Like, so for example, is V4 and V6 routes. Maybe in some implementations, they share the same table space. Okay. Is there a way to differentiate?
Yes, so if they share the same resource pool, then for both kinds of for either IPv4 or IPv6, the expected numbers should be the same.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because, like, let's say we say the same number, right? And then you basically fill up the entire pool with V4 entries, and then if it says that I still have, you know, X amount of V6, I guess how you differentiate?
I understand. So basically, what do you mean? How we can distinguish if some resources belong to the same pool, or which resources belong to the same pool?
Yeah. Anyway, so to sort of identify that, so people are aware.
So this is a valid question. I'm still thinking on the answer for it. So this API will not cover, will not give the answer for that, but I am working on. I am still thinking about some addition to that to allow the application know which objects share the same pool, because it could be different, like next hops and FDB entries could also share the same pool, and we have the same problem. So there will be an additional API, probably probably an API or something similar to know which objects share the same pool.
Okay, perfect. I guess my second question is this in lieu of all the existing APIs to query resources on a per module basis?
Again, can you repeat?
Is this API a replacement? So what my question would be: are we deprecating any sort of the query APIs that we have existing on a per module basis?
Yes, I would like to deprecate the old ones, but because this one can actually give the same functionality and more. But this is probably a question to go on if we are going to deprecate those switch attributes or not.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I think first, right? So I'm not sure. This API will give you how the resource is shared among different objects, right? So, but
no, this one doesn't.
Yeah, but I think one thing I think I want to correct is that if we use this API to query V4 and V6 routes, the return number, even if they are shared, the return number should be different, because let's say you have a shared pool, but V4 consumes less resource than V6, right? So
you mean that?
That actual number for V6 will be less than V4, right? Depending.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
so let
so
me correct my answer. So the expected behavior in case if we have more than one object in the pool is that this API should return the value for the queried type of object, assuming that no other objects of the same pool will be created. So yeah, number will be different, and it will be returned under the assumption that only these types of entries are going to be created.
Gotcha. And then I guess one follow-up, since I guess the current implementation is sort of one-dimensional in terms of it's basically you have a single pool for a single attribute, I guess. I guess when you have multivariable, sort of like, for example, apples, right? You could have, multiple tables of, parallel lookups. I guess, I was just curious if you taken any thought of that.
But ACL entry is still constrained within its table. So you can find out how many ACL entries or ACL rules you can create within this table.
Okay, sounds good.
right, but I think yeah. So the second question, I'm not sure this can replace the critical resource monitoring for the ACL because that model I think it's more complex than this one. They have the table, they have table groups. Maria, have you analyzed that? Can replace ACL function as well?
Yeah, but we can apply this API to those object types. I didn't see any specific behavior for ACL table and table groups, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, I think, for example, you can query within a table, then how many rules available. Those.
Yeah. So I'm talking about the same thing. So in case of so when you're querying the availability for the ACL rule, then you pass the table ID as the attribute in this API, and then
You don't have at table IDs, right? So where's the table ID?
Okay, maybe I don't understand your question. You want to know how many rules you can create for that specific table?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, Marian, in the Hacker spec, there is some Hacker specific attributes which are not like in the switch. They are not global. They are per object. If you look in the SAI Hacker available, so there are per object attributes there. So that's what Gohan is referring
Per
to.
object. Okay,
Yeah.
then I will have to take a look at that. I will. Yeah, I missed that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to solve everything, right? So not necessarily to replace that scenario. I'm just pointing out.
Yeah, sure.
I think one thing I'd like to see, generally, the idea sounds generic, right? So, but since you introduce this new metadata, right? So who is going to mark all these ones? So are you going to mark all of them? Right? For object type, what are the attributes that is regarded as related to resource type?
Yes, so I started doing that because some of them are straightforward. Like, for example, for ACL rule, it was the ACL table ID to know within which table to query. But if I mean, we can add more and more later. It's if someone deems that some object type could be more specific, then they could add more tags. So this is kind of for all the hardware vendors to review. and to extend. And yes, I agree that this shouldn't. The main purpose for that isn't to deprecate the existing APIs. The main purpose is to make it possible to query more objects, like those that are not covered right now by the CRM.
It seems Guhan is offline suddenly. Guhan, are you there?
I think you're right.
Yeah, looks like he might have some connectivity issue. I think he become offline, but let's go ahead.
Yeah, so that's it for my proposal. So if you have any more questions, or you could leave comments offline.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. Yeah, please comment on the pull request inside GitHub. So next is Visual from Broadcom. Let me make you the presenter.
Hey everyone, can you see my screen?
Yes, we are able to see it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Vishnu from Broadcom. I have a couple of pull requests for a review today. Both of them should be small. The first one is adding an object, adding an attribute to the trap object to know how many packets have actually hit the trap and get to the CPU. So there is an attribute that I called as trap attribute RX packets. The original, so this is on the trap object, and so people can query this and then get how many packets have come to the CPU. So the original intent was to know how many packets have actually come to the CPU. That is why it is named that. But then Guhan pointed that the trap can actually have other actions as well, not just come to CPU. But then since the action can only be one, we can change the name of this so to indicate how many packets have actually hit this trap. I'm open to change it, but in case there is a use case for counting, otherwise. This is all the first pull request is. What do you people think? Do we need to count only the RX packets? That is my use case, definitely. But we can actually change this to count all packets that hit the trap.
Sorry, can you repeat what's the difference again? What's the options that are asked here?
Okay, so the trap can actually have different options, as Gohan said. Packets can be dropped, packets can be forwarded, and packets can be sent to CPU.
Okay.
I added an attribute only to receive, to count those that are received, because that
Receive, what does receive mean then? In terms like
it's
drop,
received by
forward,
the
and distribute?
received by the CPU.
Oh,
So,
okay,
for
okay.
example, yeah, you trap all the spanning tree packets, and then you want to know how many spanning tree packets have come to CPU that way.
Okay, then to me, then have all three options, right? Drop, forward, and CPU. Is that
Right. So
possible?
that is possible. I mean, you can just rename this because a trap can only have one action at a time, I guess.
Right.
So
And then
you can just remove RX, and then trap attribute packets can give that corresponding thing. So
make it all three.
I have a more generic question. So, Marian, actually, it is like first I will ask. So, what is the status of your counter generic framework?
Yeah, it's waiting for the approval.
So, okay. So, why not use that? It's yet another object that we can bind a counter to it.
Yes, but for that we need counters to be merged into SAI.
Yeah, but again, this is a process, so I don't think that we should like come up with additional open info framework to if we have a pending one already, unless it does not address this problem, this issue, which I totally think that we need to address. So user should be able to track trap ID, whether the trap ID action is trap, forward, mirror to CPU, whatever the action is. But I think that Marian proposed framework solve it, so I think that it is better to use it.
Matti, I don't disagree, but I do not know how long we are talking about for Marian's framework. So if you can, if there is a timeline, I'm sure. So we have been having that discussion for a while. So I don't want to wait indefinitely.
I understand, but you understand that this is pending the community. It is not like it's not like it is something missing. It is there for the community to decide. So
I know.
Sorry, I was so
go ahead. You were offline. Yeah.
Yeah. So Maria's proposal, I can't remember. So I think it was okay. So what is the concern for the previous the counter proposal? Is that the
no
last
concern.
question was about okay, does it apply to a different object or those things, right? So
no, I had no concern, and I did not even have any review comments. But I wasn't sure when that is going to get accepted. That's all was my concern. If you all think we can approve this as a community, I think I am good for it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have concerns as well. So let's say we prove Marian's that one. Then as Maddie says, do you think we should use that one for this purpose to attach a counter? I think in this case we probably need to add some kind of reference to the counters we created, right? So for this type of object, is that right? So I guess then the proposal becomes, for this trap, then we'll have attributes that can be used to attach a counter. Is that correct?
Marian, so is that how that would work for me in that case? I would need to attach a reference to a counter to the trap object?
Yes, correct. So this attribute will change to counter ID list. And then you would need to create a counter and attach to the corresponding trap.
Right. Yep, that's my understanding. Good.
Marian, and remind me if you want to count both the packet trap to CPU and the packet forwarded and the packet dropped, we will attach 3 counters. I mean, how do we do that?
No. I think
an action,
trap
right?
also has one action. So
yeah,
whatever match the trap, it will count, right? Whether it's a trap or forward or drop, right? So that will be counted.
So Gon, that was the prior discussion here without the infrastructure, whether we are counting every packet matching the trap or we are counting like the various actions.
Yeah, I think we should because user specify the packet actions, right? So the user knows whether this will be drop or forward or trap. Then he look at the counter, then he knows how many packets being dropped, how many packets being forwarded or trapped, right? So
yeah. So there is one thing I want to bring up. So I don't know how this works, but one of the, if you are looking only for the packets that are coming to CPU, you actually don't need a counter because the SAI can count it by itself. It takes care of the fact that some of the packets, I mean, you could argue either way, that you have a counter in the hardware which counts before the packets are punted to CPU, and there is every likelihood that the CPU is congested and some packets are dropped because there is no, we have attached a polisher, and then you have another counter that is counting the packets that are actually received by the CPU. Which one is the thing that we would want more?
I think that this is more an hardware-based counter. So in that way, so it counts all the packets that hit this trap ID, whether this trap ID is discard, mirrored, forward, and then you can have software layer counter, which we can talk about, which is a good point actually. Whether we have additional layer that we count the packet that was per trap ID again that was actually received to the CPU.
So my use case was the later one. I want to know how many have come into the CPU. So then I'm not sure if we can reuse Marianne's proposal for this particular use case.
Yeah, okay. I didn't quite get that part. So I thought this counter was counting all the packets that match the trap.
Exactly.
So that's why I asked this question. So then, because when the counter when the packet match the trap, right? So then later to the trap group, right? So the trap group could have policers to police those traps. Then I guess on the trap group there should be some counters to count whether the packet actually go to the CPU or it's being dropped at the policer side, right? So then once it's got the policer, then maybe on the host CPU side there's a DMA, those kind of things. Maybe that could also drop the packet. Then in that case, I'm not sure even hardware has a counter to trap to associate those drops with different traps separately, or it just have a CPU and drop counters there. So what's your intention, Vishu? I guess I'm trying to ask.
Right. So I'm giving an example. I want to know how many, for example, spanning tree packets have come to CPU.
Yeah.
So So
but states, right? So we match the spanning tree, how many spanning tree, we trap the, if we matches, and that this match counter will give you all the spanning tree counters. But then the spanning tree counter, maybe you have a trap group that is also taking into place. Some are dropped, some are not dropped, right? So then there's maybe after that you have a DMA limitations, those kind of things. Are you going to all consideration?
So Guhan, so I understand what you're saying. You're saying we can have a counter in the hardware and we can use the trap group counters to see how many are dropped. From there, we can derive this information. I see what you're saying, but
actually, we might need to have different levels of counters, right? I think this one is from the packet processor point of view, how many has been trapped. What Gohan mentioned is during the DMA resource flow scenario, there might be also some drops. So I think at the DMA level, we should also have a different set of counters.
But the DMA level is currently not exposed inside. It's not abstracted. You don't have an object that represents a DMA. So for that, right. So for that, again, it is only relevant for the packet arrived from the CPU, and I totally understand your use case, and I totally agree that we need the ability to actually have a layer, like understand how many packets in the silicon in general hit a specific trap ID. This is one counter that probably we should have. Now, having said that, we need to have another counter that give you the ability to understand how many those kind of like spanning tree, whatever, actually arrive to the CPU.
Right.
When I'm saying arrive to the CPU, I'm saying that it was sent by the driver.
Yeah. Actually, I have another question. So this trap counters, right? Because in real life there are many packets that could be trapped to the CPU. So if they all get counted here, eventually we actually cannot tell how many STP packets have got trapped and then how many BGP packets got trapped, because it all get accumulated here. Is that true?
No, this is a per trap count. Per trap ID.
Oh, okay. So we will be able to differentiate different application.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is
That's
correct.
good. Yeah. Okay.
So if we go to get back to the previous discussion, so we need to figure out a way to now put a counter on the CPU part, like per trap ID, something like that. And I don't have a quick answer to that or a suggestion to that. We need to look at that again and maybe find a clean way to do it. Use the same counter approach, but this time on an object that represents only the packet that actually arrived to the CPU.
So, Marian, do you think you would want to enhance your proposal to count both ways? In that case, I'm okay to drop this, because if it would count from your perspective.
So again, I'm not sure that the way is to being able to attach a counter to a trap ID, because trap ID means a lot of different things. It can be a drop trap ID, and then it is not forwarded to the CPU. We need somehow a way to attach a trap ID to a traffic that should arrive to the CPU, to count traffic that arrived from the driver to the application per different trap IDs.
Right.
So I'm not sure currently what is the right way to do it. We can we can look at that together with Marian and try to come up with the proposal what is the right object to bind the counter for that purpose. I don't have a
host IF, right? Host IF is the right object, right? Because that is representing the interface to the CPU.
Yeah, but then host object will give you a ability to count per host object. This is a kind of different kind, another like host object and trap ID, and trap ID is not there. Like you want to be able to bind the counter on a host interface per trap ID, right? Something like that.
Right. So then, if you have an attribute that is both bound to a host interface and a trap object, then that is the value that you get.
Yeah, but as I mentioned, currently inside there is there isn't an object that gives you both attributes.
Okay.
So I totally go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the same feeling. We could somehow, if we could bind trap to a host IF, then I think we have, but that's wrong again. So.
Yeah, we can do it easily, but then it will give you all the packet that arrive to this host IF, not specific ones.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So probably we want some kind of a combination. We need to think an approach. How can we do that?
Mati, for me, it's still not really clear. How do we know that packet, even though it reached the CPU and kernel, how do we know that it wasn't dropped somewhere in the kernel?
No, just a minute. So what you can say driver-wise, driver send the packet, receive the packet and forward it call netIFRX. If it was dropped in the software in another layer, you won't be able to know that. This is like out of the scope. But of course, but again, there are a lot of dropping points in between, right? DMA, as mentioned here, and Polyser, or maybe you don't have a DMA, you have another mechanism. So of course, it is not, but the application can control the rest of it. Like from that point that you call this API, netIFRX, you can monitor that packet from the kernel on the kernel at that point, right? Just using debug regular debug hook. So, but till then it is missing.
Okay.
So we need to provide the infrastructure till you send the packet to the kernel in order for user to debug host interface or whatever.
Yeah, there can be, like as Matty says, there can be n number of dropping points, but we can figure out that how many are dropped in these n points if we know the starting point in the hardware and the ending point in the
exactly
right before it goes out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can read the kernel, the counter in the trap ID, or can read the counter and the trap ID in the host interface, and then figure out what is the difference, and then try to figure out whether they will drop on the Polyser or some other place.
Right.
Again, I don't have a good answer, at least not on top of my mind. We can take it offline and think about that, or unless
sure,
if you have an idea, please.
I think maybe to start with, in the hardware pipeline, there should be one set of counters, right? And then when it's reached, when the CPU, then are we able to also have another set of counters correspond to different trap IDs, and then is it something doable?
The traps are essentially, from a pipeline point of view, they are just rules in the ACL table. I mean, maybe I'm not aware of all the implementations. So when you know that when you have a rule in the as an ACL that says trap this package to CPU, that's the counter that I think Marianne would proposal would count.
So that would be actually from the hardware point of view, right?
Right. So that's in the pipeline. Yeah.
Right.
From there, yeah. From there, it comes through the DMA, through all these other paths into the host. Yeah.
Right. So then once it once the packet really reached the host, then I'm wondering whether we're able to also have somewhat symmetrical set of counters, right? Then we can correlate whether packets are actually dropped in between.
Right. So I think that's what even Matthew was saying.
Yeah.
We need to figure out a way to find an object to bind this counter.
Yeah.
So okay, Matty. So maybe we can take this offline and then have a reach a conclusion.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think that's a very good point. We need both, and let's try to come up with a proposal for that.
Okay. So meanwhile, I guess I am assuming we will go ahead and then take Marianne's proposal forward, right? Because this is kind of dependent on it.
Yeah. That's also my understanding. So let me see. Maybe wish you can try. You can prove it, and then we can prove it. So we can merge that one.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk to Jay. Go on.
Yeah. So then we can move forward with that proposal. Yeah. So yeah, I miss, but I think probably we can because I saw most of the job is it's more centered around because we care about jobs, right? So we mostly centered around the trap good, right? So if we define the trap good, the policers, sorry, then we know how many packets are dropped there, right? So assuming that we're not giving an unreasonable so this limiter which causes CPU DM ring to exhaust it, right? So then the most drop should come from the policers. Then where we can attach counters there, then we should be able to get the correct drop counters for the trap, right? So
But again, the problem is that trap group is aggregation of a few trap IDs. So you lose the ability to understand per trap ID how many packets arrive to the CPU. I'm not saying that there won't be a counter on the trap group. I'm saying that in addition to that, there is a use case in which you want to have actually a counter per trap IDs on the CPU side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I get that, but it really, means that if the trap group starting dropping back, either you put the different traps under different groups so that each can get counted, or we can assume that because the trap group is basically agnostic to the trap, right? So you assume that if each trap the number, then like random drop, you can distribute the drop among all those traps equally, then you would know that how many packets roughly dropped.
Yeah, I agree that it will help, but again, it won't give you numbers. Like you won't be able to understand if you are trying to understand your application. Why, for example, I don't know why your BFD is not performing as expected. So probably you would like to understand how many BFD packet was trapped by the hardware and how many, if you're doing like a partially offload BFD or software-based BFD, whatever, and how many BFD reached to the software. And
so
there are a lot of dropping point in between.
No. Say, on your software side, you will know how many BFD packet you receive, right? So then on the hardware side, then you have
well,
this.
How can you know?
Huh?
How can you know?
In your software. In your software where you count, right? So you count BFD packet you process like in the FR, the BFD, right? So you should have count how many BFD packet it receives, right? So that's
but in
what
between. But in between the driver, you do not know what you would like to have probably, right, is the driver level as well. So if you know how many packets arrived, because you don't know whether the problem is the software, I don't know, you don't have enough CPU, so you are losing packet on your socket between the kernel and the user space, or the problem is between the hardware and the DMA ring. Or the driver, whatever it is, DMA ring or not, I don't know.
Yeah, so what we need to check, right? So if we want to know whether the BFD is dropped or not in somewhere between the hardware trap and versus to the and the software received, so then you look at this per trap counters, which give you all the packet that's trapped to the CPU, and then if the number is greater than the one, then some packet is dropped in the middle. Then you look at the trap group to see whether there's any drop in that trap group. If there's no, it means that it's not going to be dropped by the placer. It's between the placer and the application. Then we can look at maybe we should have some CPU related counter to say okay whether there's a packet drop on the CPU pass, right? So then we know where the packet gets dropped. You may not have the granularity for each vantage point. You may not have the granularity to check exactly this trap ID packet, but I think it's generally enough for you to understand where the packet gets dropped, right? So.
I agree, but again, we do need to add. I think that it is worth the effort to add the ability to at least have this binding point, and then for like every binding point, we are not saying that this is must have. You don't. It's not must. Like you may support it or not.
Okay. So, that I totally agree. But that I think you need some new proposals to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what we discussed. Yeah, we will probably have to come up with a fresh proposal to see how this can be handled.
Okay. That's even better. Who is working on that, or I mean?
No, I think we just decided to work on this in this meeting.
Okay. Okay.
It's a new,
I see. So I think the baseline proposal is to get Marianne's proposal merged, and then here we add this counter, so we can attach it, right? So then that would be at least the equivalent to what the current ratios proposal, right? So.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Matty,
yeah, further add-on then we can do. Oh, okay.
Matty and Marian, I think I'll get in touch with you offline on this.
Cool. Cool.
Okay. So you have another one visual? We have only 7 minutes.
Yeah, I have another one, and I'll just maybe introduce and then see, and then we maybe continue next time. Yeah.
Yes, you can just give a high-level description.
Right. So
please go ahead.
This is my next one. The purpose of this is again to be able to identify in a switch what ports I want PTP to be enabled and then what ports I don't want PTP to be running. So I added a attribute called PTP mode in this port object, and then it can take one of the two values. PTP mode none means PTP packets will not be preferentially treated and no additional timestamping will be done. But if the mode is PTP mode timestamp, then the packets will be timestamped as per the PTP spec. So this is all the changes. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we can continue the discussion next week in case there is a need for discussion, or you can give me comments offline.
Oh, hey, so I don't know, Maddie. So the PTP is a UDP packet, right? So then, if it hits us our one of the IP2Me, then we should trap it, and then maybe I misunderstood here. What do you mean by timestamp that?
The PTP traps are already there in the trap objects list today, Gohan.
Yeah.
So this is essentially just for switching, the timestamping and switching.
Meaning, is this scenario is the PTP packet is a pass-through packet?
That is correct. Yes.
Oh, is that for the transparent clock? Maybe I'm
for the transparent one and maybe one step. Yeah, maybe we can discuss this offline, Gohan. I don't think we have time.
Okay.
Do we have actually a mode whether we want to work in transparent clock or boundary clock for PTP?
No, actually no. So I did not want to introduce all of the PTP things into this. This was a simple one. If you were to get to proper implementation for all the boundary clock mode, master mode, slave mode, all those things, then that would be a proper but full-fledged PTP changes for SAI. I wasn't sure if you want to go there.
Because currently I think that what we have is a boundary clock support, and then you can just use the trap host interface trap in order to determine whether you are trapping the PTP packet or not, the PTP control packet.
We have, correct.
Yeah,
I've seen
this
that. This is for just getting the packets across.
Right. Yeah, I understand. I totally understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not so is Matt also okay with this proposal or?
One question: what do you mean by no special processing? It's only no timestamping or something?
Yeah, no timestamping. No timestamping.
And that's
just switching. Yeah. We don't care basically that it's a PTP packet. It would be like any other packet.
I'm trying to figure out whether we want to close if we're changing that, we want to cover all the cases of PTP there. Because you what is then with timestamping? Are you referring to one step, transparent? What is the other option?
Well, you could have a two-step timestamping. Yeah. That's all
but
I can
again,
think.
you need to mention that probably. You need to be able to, because user will be. What I'm trying to say is that if someone is trying to enable transparent clock on your network, he wants to understand what he gets.
Fair enough. So I think what you are saying is we should, if I were to convert your suggestion to the changes here, we should probably add a PTP mode one-step timestamp and then maybe another one called PTP mode two-step timestamp. I think that would
exactly. Yeah. I think this is what we should do. I totally agree.
I'll change that. I'll change it and then resubmit. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Any other suggestions? Okay. There are no other sessions. I think I'm good. Please send me if there are any other sessions you could add to the PR. I'll make the change that Matty has suggested and add it back to the same PR. And you may want to add more if you have any comments into this PR.
Okay, thanks, Vishal. So we can finish today's meeting. See you guys next time. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.